So you've decided to buy a brand new speaker, but what speaker do you buy? There are so many different speakers out there, it's hard to know sometimes which is the best one for you. So in this video we're going to give you a few tips in order to consider when buying a new speaker, and also some of the pitfalls to watch out for so that you don't make a mistake. So one of the very first things I think is worth considering is your budget. The reason for that is if you have a budget in mind, that narrows down a long list of speakers into a few. It helps to reduce the number of options and gives you a better idea of what speakers will be available to you within your budget. Something else to consider, which we always recommend customers do, is to consider within their budget a portion for speaker cables. There is no point in spending money in a speaker to then put in cheap cables, because that is not going to benefit the speaker and therefore it's not going to benefit your sound. It doesn't have to be a huge proportion, but we do recommend leaving just a little bit in that budget in order to buy a set of good quality speaker cables that are going to really help impact your speaker. So budgets, of course, are going to be completely personal. Speakers can go from anything from a couple of £100 to hundreds of thousands of pounds. And your budget really will depend on your personal circumstances, but also potentially what you're using it with. Like everything, there is no point in buying a speaker at £100,000 if you're using it with an amplifier worth £2,000. It should all be relative to what you have, and the system should have some form of synergy. So if you have a larger budget, make sure that everything else around it is also going to work, otherwise you're never going to hear the benefits from your speaker. It can sometimes be better to use that budget in different ways. Use a portion of that for speakers, and then maybe use a portion to charge your electronics or your cabling. It just depends on your personal circumstances, you say, but we are of course always here if you want some advice on whether your current products are good enough to justify a speaker, for example, and to help you kind of figure out the right budget for your system. The second thing to consider is your room. Obviously, everyone's listening room is slightly different. It differs in size, differs in how it is with windows, with furniture, and there's numerous things there. So take a look at your listening room, and that will essentially give you a good idea of which speakers you can or can't use. For example, if you have a very large room, a set of small stand-mount speakers are never really going to give you the sound you want. Similarly, if you have a very small room, putting a huge set of floor standers in is going to just be way too much, and it's going to overload the sound, and it's just going to be really nasty. So you want to try and find a speaker that is comparative to your room. Now, there is no official guide really as to when a room gets so big, when I need to move in the floor standers, or if it becomes so small when I need to look at stand mounts. But there are certain speakers out there that will only work, for example, in larger rooms, or speakers that will only work in smaller rooms. Really, that is where you need the advice of ourselves, where we are able to give you that information. So if you're able to come to us and say, I have a room that is X amount of meters by X amount of meters, we'll be able to supply you with a range of speaker models that will work within that room. But obviously, as a guide, as I say, if you have a very small room, you probably will be looking at a stand mount speaker, something like the Castles we have here, or something even smaller. If you have a much larger room, you probably will be considering floor standers and something bigger to try and fill that space. The third thing to consider is your amplifier and what you're going to be using these speakers with. Obviously, all speakers have different sensitivities and impedances, and therefore you need the right amplifier in order to get the best from them. For example, a speaker that is exceptionally hard to drive will not be able to work with a low-powered valve amplifier or a low-powered Class A amplifier. You need to make sure that the products you're using, as in the amplifier, will work with your speaker. And similarly, a hugely powerful amplifier will never really give you a great sound through a very sensitive speaker, because it's almost like an overload. the speaker simply just doesn't need all that power. So again, if you're looking at a speaker, check out the output of your amplifier and check the sensitivity and impedance of the speakers. Again, this will help you narrow down what speakers are realistically going to suit you. And it's all about trying to take what is essentially a huge list of speakers to choose from and narrowing them down piece by piece, and eventually you will probably land on maybe 2, maybe 3 speakers that really suit your needs, and then it's just a matter of deciding which of those 3 is ideal for you. Obviously, another consideration is the visuals. Obviously the sound is the most important thing overall, but of course a lot of speakers are essentially furniture in our homes now, so you do have to also consider how they look potentially. Now this may not be an issue for some, but also could be a huge issue for others. We've seen it on both sides here. Of course, there are some really aesthetically pleasing speakers out there that are absolutely stunning. Again, there's so many different ways. There's retro style speakers, there's modern style speakers, there's speakers that are obviously bigger and more sort of complex shapes. There are other speakers that are much more traditional, and that's again just down to personal preference. So again, it's a case of trying to find the speaker that's right for you. Getting that speaker that obviously will work in your room, that is within your budget, that will work with your current components, and that potentially is aesthetically pleasing to you. And of course, many different finishes and colours often come into that. And like everything in hi-fi, sometimes there is a compromise there. So you sometimes have to consider maybe upping your budget very slightly in order to get the speaker that's right for you. So rather than blowing your budget on a speaker that doesn't really match all the credentials you need, sometimes it's actually better to just save up a little bit longer to get the better speaker. Or you can of course use finance to help you do that as well. The other advantage as well is with working with Kronos, we do trade-ins. So if you do buy a speaker and you change your room, you change your system, of anything like that, you can trade your speaker back in, and that's going to help you make that next upgrade step so much easier. And of course, we're always here to give advice. Some of these steps are really only to help you try and narrow it down somewhat, but obviously this is where we as a dealer come in. To give you try and find you that exact product, you probably want to get some advice, and that's where we come in, and that's where we can try and help you take, for example, those maybe 3 or 4 speakers you find that you think are perfect for you, and help you find the one that is perfect for you. Sometimes it even comes down to a speaker you maybe missed, but as a dealer we're always here to help, and we're always here to advise. Because we've heard all the speakers, because we have the in-depth training, we're able to give you a much more rich advice and information about the speakers that are available, and about how they sound, and about the music that they work with, and about the amplifiers that they work with, and the way they work in certain rooms. There are speakers out there that work in pretty much any room, and even speakers that look almost way too big for a room, but they just work because they're so neutral and universal. On the flip side, there are speakers that you would imagine would work in any room, and they are a complete nightmare. They need a very specific room. So it's all about just trying to find the right speaker for you, and it is worth taking your time just considering the different elements that come into it. And again, speaking to us as a dealer, we're always able to help. If you give us the information you have, we can pretty much pinpoint a speaker that is right for you. Of course, then you can come in and have a listen and hear it all for yourself. But yeah, there is a certain amount of criteria to consider there. But obviously, once you figure that out, please do get in touch. We're always happy to help. Or if you're confident in your decision, of course, I hope this criteria has then helped you narrow down the list of suspects essentially, and given you the opportunity to find a speaker that's right for you. So I hope this video was a little bit helpful in some way. And of course, if you ever need any help, we have lots of helpful videos and information on our website. But of course, our staff are always here to help in anything you need. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.